To Ben Goldstein's fan base all over the world. All right, first of all, welcome to the rolling Judean hills, folks. This is the Judean Roundtable in the land of Judea. Now, just before we get started, because there's so much to talk about, right? What are we overlooking? We're overlooking over this fence over here. That's southern Bethlehem. You see southern Ephrat. And then you see southern Bethlehem. I like to tell people one day that's going to be like the summer homes for Jews. In the meantime, we're forbidden from living there. But one day we're going to have summer homes. In any case, the importance of this region, and then we'll go into talking about why we're overlooking Bethlehem and sitting here in the Judean hills. These are the paths where Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, the 12 tribes walk up and down. You pick up a Bible, any Bible, and you read about these places. Shiloh, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Hebron, Beersheba. You look on a map, folks, and it's a straight line. It's a straight line that's right here, right in front of your faces. That's where the straight line. That's why this area down below is called the Path of the Forefathers. Because you stand here, and you're looking where Abraham walked, where Sarah walked, where Isaac and Rebekah walked. This is where it happened, right here. So welcome to the Path of the Forefathers. This is where the Bible happens. And overlooking Bethlehem, I think it's important today to talk about the Christians who live in the area. Once upon a time, I don't know whether a majority, but a large percentage of the Bethlehem population were Christians.
80%.
80% were Christians. Today, what's that number?
20%.
20%? I think it's lower.
It's even lower.
I think it's lower than 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, the percent, and this has happened since the Palestinian Authority has taken over, since the peace process, since the liberal world has brought in their tolerance and acceptance of the Muslim world, and yet the Christian world is being decimated under the Muslim world, and we're witnessing it ourselves in Bethlehem.
I saw today, I don't even know if you want to mention one of these radical anti-Israel organizations, you know, those who are sabotaging these birthright groups and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, one of them said, Dafka, they did it today. They posted on their feed on Twitter. One of the guys said, like, if only one day the babies in Bethlehem would be born not under occupation or whatnot, completely ignoring the fact that it used to be 80% Christian, and today it's exactly the opposite. 20%, if not even less, who are Christian there, not as a result of any Israeli policies towards the people there, but because the Christians there have fled for their lives, having to live under the Palestinian Authority. Maybe we can blame ourselves for that, maybe for creating the Palestinian Authority
100%.
And turning those areas over. So in that case, if you want to blame Israel, fine, but don't give me this nonsense about the so-called occupation is the reason why babies are growing up there impoverished and all these other lies. Anything that happens there, it's the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority, and that's why Christians are fleeing for their lives, unable to practice their Christianity. They create this once a year, this big big party, as if they're protecting, the PA's protecting the Christians. Come visit us on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve or whatnot. It'll be a big party. But the rest of the year, you do not want to be a Christian living in Bethlehem, which is, again, right behind us. So,
and even interesting about the party you mentioned, a lot of my Christian friends that I speak to here, they wanted to make sure, and I mean, in Bethlehem, they live right behind where we are right now. They wanted to make sure that I said this online to the world, that almost every single year they try to throw their massive Christmas party. And almost
Really?
And what I mean by that is they expect 20,000 people to show up. All of a sudden, a couple hundred people show up. And you have to start wondering if this isn't maybe orchestrated by those powers that be, like the terrorist Abu Mazen and his followers, where Bethlehem used to be a place where parties were on Friday night, Israelis would come in, Arabs would leave freely. Now even tourists, when they come in quickly, they see the main site, and they leave. And I actually wrote a big peace plan, which for me is amazing to write a peace plan, but using Bethlehem as the springboard. It is the one place where we can show through economic incentive, as a neighborhood of Jerusalem, 6, 5, 4, however many million tourists a year walking through those places. If that was the Disney World for Christianity, $100 to get in, I promise you there would be no terror coming out of there within a year.
I don't get that last point you're making. By the way, I don't think we've done a great introduction. Aviabolo. Obviously, hi everybody. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Ben Goldstein, the man. Okay, Josh Haston and myself, Yishai Fleischer. Shalom. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about exactly.
And Gedalia Bloom behind the
And
camera.
Gedalia Bloom making it all happen is
And
behind the
we
camera.
haven't been here for about 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks. It's
That's
been a
right.
while, so we have a lot of catching up to
That's
do.
right,
It's been
that's
a
right.
while here.
I'm not exactly sure what you were saying just now, Ben. In fact, I think it was malarkey. What I mean by that is, if you speak to any Arab, they say to you, look, Ramallah, that is the capital of the thieves. That's where the government sits, the PA government, and they steal all our money. Bethlehem, that's where tourism happens. That's where the majority of the money of comes in through tourism. And Hebron is the industrial capital. There is a lot of money coming in, but the PA doesn't care about money because at the end, it can look like a Western-style organization. It could look like many things. It's a jihadist front. It's not about the money. And to just say they're about the money and money will bring peace, it shan't. Okay, it won't, because they're really about their mission, which is to destroy Israel, control the world, control this area, and they're there to decimate Christianity because it's against their theology, and it's theologically based. It's not financially based. This whole decision.
But that's also where you didn't hear me through that to the end.
I'm sorry.
You got
Give
to
me another
get
chance.
rid of the PA from that area.
Yeah.
It's self-governed at that point, just like the old city of Jerusalem.
Right.
They don't want to tax. They despise us. They stick knives in our women as they're walking through the alleyways, and they kick them when they're on the ground. But it's amazing how many tourists go through the old city of Jerusalem and spend a ton of money compared to the amount of tourists. The shops in Bethlehem are shuttered.
Right.
They don't exist anymore.
And yet, even in East Jerusalem, right next to the old city, in Isawiya, in Jabal Mukaber, and the rest of the places, jihadism, even though these people are making bank off of Israel,
It's growing
jihadism is
leaps and
what's
bounds.
taught, jihadism it's what's believed in, and really, in order to make that economic miracle happen, you first, I think you were alluding to it, you first have to crush the jihad. You have to crush the jihad, then not only will you be crushing the guys who attack us, you also be crushing the guys who suppress the decent Arabs who want a different life.
Right, and that's all in my peace plan.
There you go, okay.
You mentioned Hebron before. I actually, just a personal anecdote from today, I get the Jerusalem Post every day. It's something I did right when I made Aliyah 17 years ago. I subscribed to the Jerusalem Post. The second I had a bank account.
Didn't you used to write for it?
Yeah, I
And
still, whatever, I
continue
still
to,
I freelance, it's been a while, but I freelance for them from time to time. Today, along with the Jerusalem Post, my delivery guy gave me a copy of this morning's Haaretz. Together, they were tied together with a rubber band. It's happened before that I've accidentally gotten Haaretz instead of the J Post, and I take it right to the bathroom and use it for backup toilet paper, but whatever. But I was reading an article saying about Hebron today. Hebron, I don't remember if it was Amir Haas or one of the other people, I don't want to misquote, but they mentioned something like to the effect of, well, there are no more so-called Palestinians. They're not in Hebron anymore. They're not there. They're just not there.
What does that
in
mean?
other
What
words,
was she trying
she
to
was
say?
basically ignoring the 200,000 Palestinians,
Ah.
so-called Palestinians, who live in the industrial capital of the PA. She was basically talking about that 400 meters or 200 meters.
She says,
Oh, of the
Right.
area where Jews
Her
live.
goal was to bash the Jews
Right.
of that area.
The 3%, what is it?
And
3% of
essentially-
Hebron that we're allowed
but
to live in.
If you read it and didn't realize that there is actually a city there with 200,000 people,
Right, that's crazy.
I believe it was her. If it wasn't her, it was somebody else in that paper that I got today. Then she made it out like, or he or she, whoever it was, made it out like there were no Arabs living
That's
at
crazy.
all in Hebron. And you could probably speak to the realities of what is going on in that industrial capital that you mentioned.
Wait,
just
before
a minute
we get
ago.
to Hebron, I want to close up with one more point
All right.
about Bethlehem. I don't know how many of you remember these days, but when my family moved to Israel and moved here to Efrat, it was 1990. In 1990, we used to drive through Bethlehem. Right? From Jerusalem to Gush Etzion, we used to drive through Bethlehem. And they said that the peace process was about forbidding Jews from driving through Bethlehem. Now it's forbidden. Not only is it forbidden for us, we will get killed if we try to drive through Bethlehem.
Right.
Peace will only come in that day where Jews, Christians, atheists, and all non-Muslims are able to drive peacefully through Bethlehem. And the other thing that makes me so sad, our mother Rachel, right? The tomb of Rachel is in Bethlehem, right? It was there before Muslims were there, right? Thousands of years.
Not according to the great historian Yasser Arafat. The great historian Yasser Arafat says that the tomb of Rachel is actually the tomb of Bilal bin Rabah, who is Muhammad's assistant. He famously never visited the land of Israel. Yet magically, he is now in
Everything's
the tomb.
magic.
He's in the tomb of our matriarch.
Of our matriarch.
Rachel.
Lucky for us, we don't follow
Crazy.
Yasser Arafat's
Crazy.
way.
but it's crazy because you look at pictures back from the beginning of the 20th century. Beginning of the 20th century, just 100 years ago, all you see is the tomb of Rachel and nothing else. That was Bethlehem, right? There was no Muslim city, no Muslim town of thousands, hundreds of years. Bethlehem was the tomb of Rachel. There was nothing there. And today you go to the tomb of Rachel, and it's a fortress. Why is it a fortress? Because the Muslims have thrown Molotov cocktails at it and attacked the soldiers there, even killed soldiers there. And we've built a fortress to protect the tomb of Rachel, who is a matriarch of all of humanity. And when I go there, I'm happy to be visiting the Mother Rachel and to pray there. But to know that I'm going in a fortress, and it doesn't look like that picture from 100 years ago anymore. That is the traditional tomb of what Rachel looked like. So again, we're not going to have peace until we're all allowed to travel through Bethlehem and able to pray and visit our holy sites in peace. And that's not happening under Palestinian Authority as long as we're appeasing the jihadists in the world.
But it's also not going to happen. I think Ben can speak to this. When we show weakness, okay, we are the ones who built these fences. We are the ones who ensconced the tomb of Rachel in this like big fear factory, this big fear kind of palace, this jail cell, and we are not behaving like Middle Easterners. You have to behave within the context and the rules of the Middle East. If you try to import the West to here, well, this is not America. It's not between the Pacific and Atlantic and Canada and Mexico. This is between. This is a tough neighborhood, and you have to act in accordance with the tough neighborhood, and that means that you attack, you push out. Right. You don't. When you build a wall, you're saying everything is yours up to this wall, and I'm afraid behind this wall. Even the Bible relates that if you see walled cities, that means those are cities where people are afraid. Maybe Ben has a comment on the security and the way to think about, how to hold on to this land property.
By the way, just before you go there, one thing that makes Efrat unique as of other settlements in Judea and Samaria is ideologically there is no fence, there is no wall, specifically for those purposes.
Yes, that's true, but Efrat also made very, very clear when they first came here that they wouldn't, quote-unquote, encroach on any Arab boundaries, meaning Efrat built lengthwise instead of out, so you're showing a ton of, I guess you can say, respect towards your Arab neighbors. But in just about every community surrounding us right now, we have all ghettoed ourselves into our own fences and walls within our own communities. We live in a country, unfortunately, where we can't even pray. We can't open our mouths at the Temple Mount. Unfortunately, that is still the reality. What I really wanted to say, though, about Bethlehem, and this is my last thing on it, is that I believe the Christian world has fumbled the ball tremendously. There's billions of you out there, and it's almost as if you just don't care about what is one of your holiest places in the world. And I suggest you start caring. You have to care, or Bethlehem will continue to fall.
I want to say about that today's a special day in the Christian calendar, okay? And behind us is Bethlehem. We know the history. I think also it's an opportunity, as you said, to care about their Christian brothers and sisters, but it's also a moment to care about the land of Israel and maybe do a little bit of tshuva, a little bit of repentance. Christmas was a very bad time for Jewish people, historically. In Roman periods and the Byzantine periods, it was really a time of torture of Jews, impalements, all kinds of, they would pick a leading Jew, put on a funny hat on him, parade him through the streets, make him the king, and then kill him afterwards. All kinds of horrific stuff happened on this day. So much so that some of our great rabbis, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, would not learn Torah in the day of Christmas because it was such a day of also of darkness, dark energy, that like any goodness would kind of roll into that darkness. So it's a dark day for us Jews, right? So I know in America it's like, look, it's Hanukkah, it's Christmas, it's shopping, it's fun, everybody likes the Christmas spirit. Okay, but for those of us with a historical memory, we know it's a dark day for Jewish people. I think today's a great day to do some tshuva and to realize also that America, a great country and a great friend, has also been part of the efforts to empower the Palestinian Authority to take over this land, to crush Christians, to fight against Israel. I think today's a day of tshuva. Can we make Christmas into a day of tshuva where Christianity, with pro-Israel Christians, non-Jews, remember what was in the past and say, okay, we're going to use this day to actually make amends and fix things that are broken between us.
I was going to say, you mentioned the security aspect of it and the walls and the fences or whatnot. Actually, I wasn't going to self-promote. I have an article coming out for JNS News probably by tomorrow, in which there was a conference last week at the Begin Sadat Center in Bar Ilan University, where leading experts have been doing studies on this, the effects of Israel's security fence and whatnot. And you have several of the leading experts who are saying, and they have the stats to back it up, that it wasn't the fence per se which was constructed which caused a significant reduction in suicide bombing. They said it was complementary to the fact that Israel gained access to Areas A back in Operation Defensive Shield back in 2002 to 2005. So I think we need to remember, as you said, this isn't Canada, U.S. This isn't the Canada-U.S. border.
It's not the Mexico border either.
It reminds me that you're right. It's not the same thing as the wall that the President of the United States wants to build. That's for a different purpose.
Right. Walls are good for immigration.
Yeah, that's
They're also good for car theft. We had a big car theft problem. That's stopped.
Yeah.
But it's not for security.
And they all acknowledge it. But these leading experts are saying it's the freedom of movement of the IDF and the security forces who can go in on a nightly basis. This has been going on now for a decade and a half. Nightly access to go into what's known as Area A, essentially turning it into Area B or C or whatever you want to call it. And it's that access to be able to thwart these attacks. And 95%, according to the stats I got, 95% of these attacks are actually thwarted. Unfortunately, you have that 5% which tries to carry out, and then you have 1/10 of that 5%, as we saw 2 weeks ago. We haven't even discussed it in this forum. The attacks in the Binyamin area, at the
we haven't talked about
outside of Ofra, and also Givat HaAsaf. Horrific attacks. 2 soldiers were killed, and a baby delivered prematurely who was murdered, who lost his life in that attack. So
and another young soldier who's
fighting for his life still.
Nathaniel Felber, who's still struggling for his life with a bullet in the brain.
Right, but bottom line is, this is not. It reminds me of that Simpsons episode. The Simpsons show up in Israel, and Marge Simpson, the mother, says, "You Israelis are so pushy." And then Sacha Baron Cohen, the voice of the tour guide, is like, "Pushy? You try to live with Syria as your neighbor. You try to live you and the big, great, evil Canada." So it reminds me of that. This isn't U.S. Canada. This is a little different
by the way,
reality out here.
Talking about the wall, most people don't know this. Okay, when the security wall, which is really mostly a fence, is talked about, the apartheid wall, right? In order for a wall to be effective, what does it have to be? It has to cover the whole area to block, right? For a wall to be effective. If you're able to go through a wall or around a wall, then a wall isn't effective, correct?
Yeah.
Now, I want to have everyone looks carefully in the distance. We're supposed to be seeing a wall. There's supposed to be, the continuation of the wall is supposed to be right next to our community, separating this community of Efrat and Bethlehem. But the wall is not there. What I'm trying to tell you is that security apartheid wall is not built fully around all of Judea and Samaria.
Only
it's not even
62%.
Only 62%. That means 38% of the area that's supposed to be blocked by a wall is open. So anyone who wants to get through can get through. So don't let anyone tell you. I mean, again, whether the wall is built or not, it's just further proof that it's a bunch of anti-Israel PR and calling Israel.
But here's a big mistake. When you build a wall like that, you better take into account what PR damage is going to do to you. Okay, if you're going to build a wall, for example, in Hebron, if you say, okay, watch out, you're shaking the table. If you take Hebron and you take the Arab store owners out and you compensate them and you say there's too much danger here. Okay, there's too much terrorism, so we're going to compensate you and move you. If you're going to leave those stores empty, what's the PR damage to that? Okay, there's going to be a whole group of people who are going to say Hebron is a ghost town, and here's the proof.
They
Okay,
said it today. They said it today
you build a wall down the middle of your country. You better be mentally ready for somebody to write a graffiti saying I can't get to my mom's house right across this fence, and this is an apartheid wall, all that business. And Israel's got to know we are fighting 2 battles at the same time. There's the physical battle to destroy, annihilate Israel, but there's also the PR battle, the narrative war. And the wall has been a tremendous narrative boost for our enemies. Okay, and you can explain it away and say it's only 62% and this and this and this and this, and maybe it was good and maybe it was bad.
No, I didn't get to finish.
Okay.
The finished point is we're gonna end up taking it down.
Right.
The wall does not. It only provides I'm not going to argue against whatever security it does provide, but obviously because it's not a full wall, it doesn't provide the full security a wall is supposed to provide. Yeah. And the ultimate peaceful relations of us living with those neighbors who want to live peacefully with us will only happen when there is no wall, and the wall's going to be taken down. That's the ultimate. Whether the rest is built or not is regardless. Besides the point, it's going to be taken down. We're going to get there.
When we were in Lebanon, we used to have, and this was in '95. We used to have jeeps, open jeeps, not defended jeeps.
That's
4
right.
machine guns with the bullets
That's
ready
right.
to go. A tiny little.
We used to walk on the roads.
Right.
We used to walk on the roads of Lebanon.
And we dared you to mess with us.
That's right.
We dared you to mess with us because we'll blow you right out of the water.
Look, what we're all talking about is the same thing. It's
Right.
all spiraling back to one common point. A, I believe Oslo was a complete disaster. Not that we need to go back to the Oslo Accords. But B, every time in any type of fight, you start moving backwards. And you said it before. You have to be on the attack in this neighborhood. This is a neighborhood where we have a sea to our back. Nothing has changed. That sea is still there. But people are starting to see them as the David and us as the Goliath. And guess what? I'm starting to enjoy that.
Yeah.
Because finally in our history, we are seen as a people that can take care of our own. And the world doesn't know how to handle that right now. So yes, we can talk about walls, building walls. The terrorists can get an AK-47 right now from Hebron and be right outside of Efrat in 10 minutes if they chose to. The entire education system here, as you mentioned, the entire Arab community here as a whole, including Israeli Arabs, their system is broken. According to us. According to them, it's a fully functioning system because they're doing the exact jihadist work that they're being paid to do. So we have to start from the beginning.
There's a sickness, though. Now, I've been spending a lot of time on Twitter this past week, and last week I wasn't feeling well, so I was
a lot of time on Twitter.
On my back on Twitter. What else are you going to do? And unfortunately, it's not just the Arabs. There's a group of Jews out there. Again, you're supposed to love every Jew, okay? Let's acknowledge that. You don't hate another Jew, but that being said, you don't have to accept their actions and the things that they do. You don't have to accept them as real or for factual or right or just. There's a whole group of Jews out there who cannot stand the fact that we have the power, that we have the strength. They will not accept Jewish pride, Jewish power, the fact that we have our own country, control our own destiny. And it's again, I don't know numbers. I don't know how many are there. They could be the minority, but they're a loud minority. And a lot of people are unfortunately buying into that, and we've had it every generation. We've had it every generation.
There's certainly a majority on campuses in terms of professors.
And that's a big problem. But
are you referring to people in Israel? You're referring to people in America?
All over the world.
Because global Zionism is
all over the world.
I mean, it's Nazism all over the world
in different places. Right. But we still have to stick to our guts and still be strong, even though those who are afraid, embarrassed, ashamed that we won in 48, we won in 67, we're winning today. Even with the bad things that happen from time to time, Jews have to accept that.
I have a formula.
That's one of the reasons why we're doing this Judean roundtable, to get the truth out so people realize what's going on here.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Subdue or be subdued. That is my formula. Subdue or be subdued. That's it. That's the only way it works around here. And you can be like, you know what I liken it to? It's like an American comes to shop at the outdoor market at the Shuk here in Israel. If you think you're going to stand in line like you do in Walmart, you're not getting anything. Okay, you're not going to buy anything. You got to know that the Middle East has different rules, and they have a beauty to them. And you know what? Maybe they're not as good. There's some things that are not as good. Maybe it's not as good as America. Maybe it's nice to stand in line. Okay, but still, that is the rules. That's the way it is. You're not going to change 4,000 years of this region's history, overnight. You could strive for it, but generally you have to know, in terms of security, when people want to kill you, it's subdue or be subdued. And by the way, notice the word subdue. It does not mean kill. It does not mean evict. It means like subdue that will to want to destroy you, and make sure that they accept the idea that you're not moving anywhere. 100%. You're not going anywhere.
Listen, I believe that one thing that we are blessed with, and I'm talking about the we around this table, and I imagine some people who are watching as well, is what's saving us and our families and those who know us and think like us. We have an appreciation of being blessed for understanding and knowing history. We know our history. We know who we are because of our history. We stand here looking at the hills, whether we're in the hills of Judea or we're on the beach of Tel Aviv, and we know the biblical history also of the rest of the country. That is what drives us in our feet into this land and sprouts from our heads with our pride of being Jews. Those Jews out there who are not proud of being Jews and are embarrassed by the strength of the land in the state of Israel today are because, one, they either do not know their history, they do not care about their history, they never want to learn our history because they have changed over their identity to a different identity, which we don't, that's a whole different program we don't have to go into today, which is why everything we talk about at all points of time touches upon our historic roots. Every time you do a video, you go there. You, me, Gedali, we always go there. And it's not just about us going there for ourselves. It's so we're passing over that information to everyone out there. And that's what's saving us. And that's the message I believe we're all giving over. Save yourselves. And again, for Jews out there, save yourselves by learning your history. Don't just treat the Bible like a book going to bed with, or like a story that never took place, or a fairy tale. That is your history. Own it, internalize it, own who you are, and then grow to appreciate where the Jewish people are today with the state of Israel.
There are people who are not into history. You know, they say, what do I care about yesterday? I want to start today. And if you listen to Shimon Peres, he railed against history. He railed against this country and this region being too connected to the past, and he said, move to the future. You know, and there's a certain element of a point there, right, which is you can't be, like, bound by, you know, the ways of the past. For example, the Zionists were, in one sense, a departure from Jewish history of 2,000 years of exile. But in their mind, they were part of Jewish history because they plugged back into the Bible, like Ben-Gurion. But Ben-Gurion basically saw the Bible as a history book, not as a religious book. Okay, for you, you probably see it as both God's command and also a historical imperative. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing that has been lost is nationalism. People don't feel a sense of nationalism anymore, and especially places like America and campus.
It's been made taboo.
It's been made taboo. And another thing that's been forgotten is the Holocaust. Okay? That's another thing that sits in our minds, which is, okay, never again, I don't want to be weak again. But that has also been undermined by the creation of the Israel is the Goliath doctrine, which means that we are not in a defensive position, yet we still are. Even though some people believe we're a Goliath, we still are here relatively. So those three legs, that is the Bible, either history or religion, nationalism as a right of peoples, or the Holocaust as a specific thing for Jewish people that we've suffered, those legs have been all kicked out. I think that the secular world is now going to another purpose for Israel, which is light onto the nations through technology. To look at what we're doing. But I think that if you can't accept history, if you don't know history, which is too bad, if you don't know nationalism, which is too bad, if you don't know the Holocaust, which is really too bad, if you're not into Israel being a light unto the nations, if that doesn't answer you, then you'll have to just believe that we're strong. And that's what you're going to have to believe, that we're not going anywhere, that we are like a tenacious people. However you want to understand it, accept it or don't accept it, we're a tough lot. And even liberal Jews, you're not going to undermine us. We're a tough lot, we're going to be here. And if you can't understand what we're talking about, just accept the fact that we're badass and we're going to be here. Okay? And we're all Ben Goldstein here. Okay?
Well, I also don't think that it's our job in Israel necessarily to try to change the liberal Jewish left mindset in America. I think American Jews, if they're not living here, they need to step up to the plate and try to change the way their community is seeing Israel. Israel is fighting so many battles on so many fronts, and I also don't believe that Jews outside of this land had such a major impact as to where we stand today with area A, B, C, D, all the way out to Z.
Well, in this town,
there is an American who came here, but I mean the general security aspect, the political aspect, I don't believe there's a lot of weight that the American Jewish communities really throw towards what eventually turns into the political reality here. I think it's up to us here to shore up our borders here, to show this strength to our enemy, even though I say this every time I open my mouth. We all know that's the truth, but American Jews, and not just American Jews, Jews globally have their own job to fight that tide on their own there. Yeah. We're not the Entebbe raid coming to rescue you every second.
Yeah, Yishai, though, I touched on this recently in an op-ed, I think it was in the Forward, about birthright as an example. And I'm talking about specifically, it's great what birthright has done, and Gedalia could probably write a whole book.
He's a success story.
On
birthright success story.
And
I could write about my children.
About his children and whatnot.
The product of birthright.
But sitting here in Efrat, and by the way, you mentioned the beach, the Mediterranean. I mean, it just over. You can't see it from where you are, but literally over that hill. If we were on the other side of the hill, you could see the water. That's how small this country is. But with the birthright issue, that is unfortunately a failure. Not to go into a birthright bashing session, as Yishai wrote. the fact that they won't come to this area and understand how important it is and how vital it is, whether it's from a historical perspective, a security perspective, and all the other reasons and rights, a legal perspective of what we're doing here. And that's something that educationally, which they are not getting, whether it's on campus, whether it's in the high schools, maybe some of the Jewish high schools, but certainly not in a public school realm. And seeing is believing, and those people have to come out here to see what we're doing here, why we're doing it here, and maybe they'll understand a little bit better why others consider us to be this, big bad Goliath or whatnot. Maybe they'll understand, maybe appreciate the fact that now we have our own country, our own army. We call the shots, badasses, he said, and I think maybe they'll appreciate that a little more. A lot of people, their opinions change once they come out. I'm sure you experienced that when they come to Hebron, when they have this whole perception of these horrible Jews who are closing off areas to Arabs and whatnot. And then you go up on that outlook and you see the thriving 200,000 Muslims, Arabs who have a huge industrial city, and their Mercedes and their BMWs driving around, like they own the place. It creates a whole new perception of those who are actually willing to come out here and see for themselves.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, could you imagine if there was, how many birthright kids come out? Or birthright people, I don't know if they're all kids.
I think Birthright has brought some 200,000 students altogether.
So from you literally owning the streets of Hebron, knowing every alleyway, could you imagine if 200,000 of them flooded the streets throughout this amount of time? What would that have done differently as far as the reality on the ground where you are in Hebron?
Well, I don't know if it would have changed the reality on the ground, but what's happening right now is yet another step which you didn't mention exactly, which is that they're taking it, the organization known as If Not Now.
Right. I didn't know if you were allowed to mention them.
They're taking it to another level, which is they're saying, hey, Jewish community, you've hidden away from us the reality of the occupation, and you're not showing us the way. And you want to show us in Israel that's a rose-colored glasses Israel. It's high-tech, and it's pretty, and it's nice, and it's Tel Aviv, and it's beaches, and it's fun, and it's parties, but you don't want to show us the deep, dirty occupation. And we're saying, we, the quote-unquote settlers of the occupation, are like, no. I agree with you, If Not Now. Bring them here.
And we'll show you the truth.
We'll show you the truth.
Okay, so where are they being stopped? Who is stopping them? What policy?
No. So this,
policy.
wait a second.
Policy.
There you go. That's the original sin. The original sin that the policymakers of Israel and the Jewish establishment have wanted to hide the political hot potato of Judea and Samaria. So they never dealt with it. So they created a black hole that, if not now, is jumping in. And the anti-Israel left is jumping in and having a field day because because the Jewish establishment and the Israeli establishment are still not willing to deal with those issues publicly, to be able to say, listen, I just, last week, Hanukkah, 2 weeks ago, Michael Oren was traveling around Gush Etzion, right? He is a deputy minister, a Chaver Knesset. He was the Israeli ambassador to the USA during the Obama years. He's succeeded then. He was involved in all the politics, whatever, peace plans, this, that, the Obama pressure. And when he was here, he went publicly. He's in a centrist party, Kulanu Moshe Kachlon. He was out here. We went out to the Eitam. He went out to Neve Daniel. He went out to Oz V'Gaon for a sovereignty conference of the youth. And in each place, he said the following message. He said, we finally have to get the message out to the world that this whole land belongs to the Jewish people up to the last milliliter. We finally have to say that. Not milliliter, right?
Millimeter.
Millimeter, right?
Well, if you're talking about the water, it's
Right? Every last centimeter and millimeter of this land belongs to the Jewish people. And he said it for two reasons. We have to say that, one, because that is morally correct. And two, on a tactical, strategic, negotiating level, you have to say that. Up until now, we
just don't use the word negotiating. Can we
of
just
20 years of talks with our enemies, they say it all belongs to them, and the Israeli leadership, okay, we'll give you half and we'll take half. Basically saying only half belongs to us.
Right.
And this is Michael Oren, deputy minister, saying, no, that's been a mistake, and we finally have to correct that.
Yeah, but you know what you're missing here?
What am I missing?
That we haven't learned from our history.
Exactly.
And we just talked about you missing. I'm saying all of us.
Exactly.
We just talked about how important our history is, yet even our recent history, we keep stepping right back in the landmine.
And that's because of something that Josh said, which is, he said it a few times, but it's easy to gloss over, which is, there is some kind of internal Jewish fear of Jewish power. You know, I had this realization that American Jewry really can never understand what's happening here in Israel because they're involved in a different mode of Jewish existence.
Correct.
Being a Jew in diaspora and working it, like Joseph did, like Mordechai did, like Jews of Spain did, being a Jew involved in the courts, in the royal courts of various kingdoms, and knowing how to maneuver and knowing how to be an important Jew there and knowing how to defend your community, that's been a very stable and important way that Jews have managed to make it in the diaspora. But that is far from being the ruler, being the sovereign, okay? Here in Israel, suddenly we're the sovereign, which means that we've got to deal with things like immigration, or with feeding the Holocaust survivors, or with massive millions of kids in education. We've got to deal with these massive questions, not our small little community that we have to, milk the government to make sure that it gives us what we need. We're the sovereigns. Now, you're an American Jew, and I mean this with total respect. Your consciousness is of the diaspora variety. How could you understand and judge what it means? And it's much dirtier and more problematic to be the sovereign. It's just much more messy, okay? And they don't have that sense, and maybe they recoil from that sense. And when they see the sovereign, right, the Jews are always at the civil rights marches. They're always fighting, truth to power. That's the Jews, truth to power. Now we're the power. Okay? And so they don't understand it, and they recoil a lot of times at the messiness, the beautiful messiness that is what it is to be a sovereign. So they don't always understand it.
And throughout world history, and again, God forbid, you need to understand whether you're in America. I just came back from Cape Town. Beautiful, thriving, wonderful city, Jewish community, so welcoming, kosher restaurants, everything you need, they have it. Takeout food, schools, yeshivas, the whole deal there, beautiful. And, America is what, 244 years old? I don't do math.
77.
Approximately.
Yeah.
277 years old?
No. It was 1877.
Oh, 1776.
1776.
So that's 240. Somebody do the math.
It's very
Whatever
easy.
it is.
It's very easy. I was born on the bicentennial.
So was I.
This is
1976.
42.
Right. Okay. There you go. I don't.
It's 242.
The people who know me listen. No, I don't do math. But the bottom line is the golden. How long was the golden age for Spanish Jewry? It was over 300 years. So that golden age for Spanish Jewry was longer than the existence of the U.S. Now, I'm not wishing anything bad upon U.S. Jewry, God forbid.
God forbid.
I have roots there. The United States saved my family, my father, my family, after the Holocaust. If it wasn't for the U.S., I would not have had the opportunity to even come to Israel. So I'm not bashing, the fact that there are Jews in America
No, you're just looking at the historical timeline.
But the historical timeline shows that when the S hits the fan, okay, as it has in every single country in which Jews thrived when they weren't controlling their own destiny, anything's possible. God forbid, but anything is possible.
Right.
And here, where we're living, we control our own destiny, and we have that burden of being the stronger, and they make us out to be the aggressor or whatnot. Bottom line, what I'm trying to say is I'd rather take my chances here, where you have the strength, where you have an army who are thriving in the diaspora. If I was a gambling man, I'd gamble on Israel.
I've got a question to go full circle, if we can, about the Christians in Israel under the PA. Now we're the power, right? What kind of responsibility do we have as Jews who have power, who are quote-unquote occupying, and allowing the Christians to be harassed, killed, firebombed, and driven out of their own Nazareth? You go there now, you talk to the Arabs there, they wish the Christians would come back. Bethlehem, they're gone. What's our responsibility to the Christians?
So Gedaliah's question is, what is our responsibility as a sovereign? So a lot of times when you debate with left-wingers, they'll say to you, you guys just want to take away rights and ethnically cleanse and all that. And I would say to them, actually what right-wing means is that a bigger Israel means more rights for more people. Okay, it means that we actually defend the people that are our residents and our citizens, our subjects, the subjects of this state. However, that is not the direction in which the Oslo Accords took us. It took us to the place where it actually created a different sovereign, a jihadist sovereign that was repressive to its own people. And when you argue with the left, a lot of times, again, they'll say to you, like, you're against human rights, you're against democracy. I say to them, don't get so high and mighty on me here. You're the one who empowers the PA. You're the one who doesn't give a lick about Arabs. What you want to do is put them behind the fence. You don't care who's in charge of them. Just let them rot over there in Palestine or wherever it is. I was debating Dr. what's his name, one of the architects of Oslo.
Balin,
Dr. Balin, right? You'll see
right.
Balin. And I said this to him on TV. I said to him, you don't give a lick about the Arabs. You say democracy, but what you mean is democracy for me and my friends and those guys behind the wall.
Right.
Right. They go. So he goes, you're right. Because you're right. I don't care. That's what he said to
Their
me.
campaign right now, the left campaign right now, is let's get a divorce from
Right.
the Arabs.
That's
That's
right.
what they're trying to get people to vote left.
That is Tippy Livni's platform
Right.
right now.
So
Separation,
right.
and
The left
divorce.
don't care
And
about
by the
And
way-
all these commanders are saying it also.
And by the way, when you're in
So-called.
Dizengoff Square, which is awesome, and I love Tel Aviv, I love it with all my heart. I love Yaffo, I love Tel Aviv, I love that part of the country. But when you're there, you also know that it's the bastion of not necessarily nationalistic thinking. When you're there, when you're in Dizengoff Square, you're like, this is an awesome and fun place to be. And what the hell do I need the Hebrons and the Bethlehems and the Ephrats for? It's easy to be divorced in your mind.
Right.
From these places when you're just a bit of distance, and if you're drinking your latte on the beach of Tel Aviv, it's easy to be like, I don't care. But the truth is that without Judea and Samaria, the jihad will eat it up.
Would be in Tel Aviv.
And will be in Tel Aviv, and that's exactly what it seeks to do.
Right.
That's what it seeks to do.
And bringing it from a different angle to Bethlehem and the Christians, and I'm going to go to the whole Middle East. There was a video, about 7-8 years ago. Clavin, what was Clavin's first name? Clavin on
the media?
whatever it is, Clavin,
Yeah.
whatever his first name is, I forgot. He's very funny, great guy.
Michael, is it?
No. So he has the one state solution video, which is basically showing the picture of the Middle East and the Arab Muslim countries all around, all their flags, and then you see the Israeli flag on the tiny little speck of Israel, and he goes, what I'm about to show you is this is going to be peace in the Middle East, and the whole Middle East turns into an Israeli flag.
Yeah.
Because what he was trying to say is the only one who looks after human rights and equal rights for all minorities is Israel. So the way that the Christians, the Baha'is, the Muslims, the Druze, the this, that, the only way all of them will be able to live in peace, no matter where they live in the Middle East, is if Israel's in charge. And again, the other sad thing, again, I'm going to touch upon the Christian world. Again, they say that this is the bastion, this is where Christianity developed in the Middle East, right? And the oldest, most ancient civilizations of Christian society is in the Middle East, and it's being decimated. Decimated.
The Copts.
Decimated. The Copts in Egypt.
Copts in Egypt, which are really the last really of the original Egyptians.
Right.
And they accepted upon them, so they're the earliest Christians, and they're being totally destroyed.
Right, and to touch upon what your message about in terms of tshuva, repentance, in terms of the Jewish people and what the day of Christmas was for the Jews, that we suffered so much on that day. But here we're at a moment in time where if just the whole Jewish world and whole Christian world would realize, oh my God, there is one religion of people out there looking to kill all of us, and have actually decimated the Christian world in the Middle East. They're looking to decimate the Jewish world here in the land of Israel for 100 years, if not more. We just have to come together and stand up. And if we have the pride in our own identities, Jews, Christians, non-Muslims of all types, of all stripes, we all come together in pride in our own identities and stand up. Not only will we have a more secure future for our children and grandchildren, for our own communities, but also for all the freedom-loving Muslims out there who are also persecuted by their own. And that's something that the left liberals dismiss.
That's right.
Instead of reaching out to those freedom-loving Muslims, they give platforms to the jihadists and to the Muslim brotherhoods and to the CARES. And it's just
Ben, as a security guy, right, who does security and secures the perimeter of your town, if you got a call to drive into one of the Arab villages to go save Christians, would you go in?
Meaning if I had backup?
No, of course you have backup. The point
Hell
is
yeah, I'd
what
go
we're
in.
talking about.
I help them every chance I get here in the local area.
Yishai, when we're talking about what's our responsibility for the Christians, he gave a great macro answer, that we need to have sovereignty over all of Judea and Samaria in order to create this right-wing human rights blanket across the whole country. But on a micro level, when we don't have that sovereignty, right, what is Ben Goldstein, who is the highest energy, Jewish adrenaline kind of guy, proud Jew, proud Israeli, and a human rights fighter, despite the fact that people look at you with a big rifle, that's a human rights tool right there you're holding, right? And so, would you go would you go in? I mean, essentially, because of course you would jump in front of a bullet for a fellow Jew.
I believe every Christian in this country should be granted automatic citizenship if they don't have any previous security offenses. I believe they deserve it. I believe my friends used to have the ability to travel freely, and I'm talking, like you said, in the early 90s, mid-90s.
Yeah.
I recall that very clearly, seeing that happen out of Bethlehem. And as you mentioned, the whole Lebanon aspect, everything has become more insular now. We've all kind of gathered into our own mental and physical ghetto at this point. If the Christians needed help, and they do need help, it is absolutely our responsibility as the sovereigns. I have really traveled most of this land. I have yet to see a green line anywhere. I have stepped over that line on many occasions, and I've considered myself to be more in Israel here on the spinal column of Judea than I do in many other places. And I believe many of the Christians there, if not almost all of them, simply want to live their lives in peace, just like Christians want to do all over the world. Unfortunately, we as the sovereign have yet to kick the Islamists in the ass and show them who the boss is here. And as Yishai mentioned, it is subdue or be subdued. As a very quick, for instance, there's two villages locally here, and I may have mentioned this before, but two clans had a fight. And most people in the States that are watching this, if they have a fight with their neighbor, if it got really bad, if they couldn't go to Starbucks and talk about it, if it got really bad, they get lawyers, and they'd fight it out in the courts. How do the Arabs do it in the villages right here next to us? They grab AK-47s, and they show up at each other's houses, and they kill each other. That's how they solve problems. So we need to rescue our Christian brothers and sisters by building up Bethlehem for them, by building up Nazareth, which, by the way, is being taken over by the Islamic Front. They are literally forcibly buying every building in the Nazareth area. They're forcibly taking it away from Christians. And the Christian world's silent on this. And could you imagine the amount of wealth and power the Vatican has if when the Pope came here, instead of just taking a cross that he could feed the entire town of Bethlehem with for a year, and blessing them and leaving, and then telling every embassy and consulate in the world that they are not allowed to take Christians out for political asylum because they want to keep the remaining Christians in? This problem is so multifaceted that I believe the blame lies on many angles, but if we freed the Christians here and we gave them citizenship, I can promise you they would grow to be incredible citizens of Israel.
It would also be a great example of what's going on in Lebanon today, with Hezbollah and the Islamists who took the Paris of the Middle East and turned it into the Baghdad of 1992.
And why? Because we sent Arafat there way back when to make his camp, and ever since then it's been hell on earth.
And on a local level, by the way, even if it isn't Christians and security or whatnot, just on a humanitarian level, you know how many times Arabs from local villages showed up at the entrance to Efrat?
Oh, just a week ago.
For like asylum?
No, not for asylum, but to save lives, medical treatment. Or how many times I know, medics who work for different Hatzalah organizations, whether it's Hatzalah Yudav Shomron or whatnot, Judean Samaria, who need an army escort, but they're the ones who get the calls to go in to the Arab villages, and literally, we're talking about not even Christians here, we're talking about Muslims, save lives of the Muslims there. And unfortunately, they have to bring so much, you asked Ben if you would go in. I mean, these people are risking their lives, men and women, medics, first responders, and teams going into these villages because they call the Israelis, because they know when push comes to shove, if they need medical, life-saving help, they're calling the settler people and using their ambulances to come into these towns to put their lives at risk.
Well, the head of Hamas, I know I'm not on camera, but the head of Hamas just sent his own daughter into an Israeli hospital.
Yeah, because they know.
I mean, this is recently.
Right.
He's got sisters living in the south.
I want to say that I love what Ben was saying, but I want to make my caveat anyway. I wouldn't jump to give people citizenship. I would give residency. I think residency should be much more developed. Residency is the first step. Residency means you're protected by the state. Residency means that you're a subject of the state. Residency means that you'll get a Bill of Rights. That it means that you'll get roads and education and clean water, upward mobility, women's health, birth rights, all these kind of things. But I wouldn't be quick to give citizenship. I think that turns around on you pretty quickly. We have today 2 million Israeli Arab citizens who, didn't run away, who wanted to accept the sovereignty of Israel, but it turns out that there's a lot of jihadism in that.
Though.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
I wouldn't jump to it. I would give residency and a pathway to citizenship for people who prove loyalty, but I would be a little bit more. We're still a defensive country, And like, I'll give you an example. I am very upset about one thing right now, which is this Knesset member named Ayman Ouda, who's the head of the Joint Arab List. This guy, I know exactly where he grew up because I grew up there as well. And he grew up in the most idyllic and beautiful Arab village and not regular Muslims. They are a persecuted minority of Muslims called the Muhammadan sect, and they're hated. They're like semi-Shiite, and people hate them, and we protect them. And yet today, one of the most vicious anti-Israel Knesset members is this guy who's calling for the destruction of the Jews of Hebron. This guy Ayman Ouda. So therefore, I'm just saying I'm cautious with citizenship. And sometimes a democracy, everybody's like, "Whoa, apartheid!" Listen, democracy is under threat. Always limit rights. Okay, just like Lincoln suspends habeas corpus during the Civil War. It's the same thing. You don't give every right that you have under a situation of war. I would say, okay, you are under our protection. I agree with you. By the way, in principle, I agree with you, which is protect them. But I wouldn't hand out citizenship very quickly. By the way, I would add one more thing to that, which is, if there is a Gentile, a Goy, a nation out there, people from the nations, who loves Israel with all their heart, how many of you guys have met and have gotten emails?
Today?
Yeah, from people who are like, I love Israel.
In the last hour?
It's some guy from Norway. It's going to be some guy from Denmark.
We get it all the time.
All the time, right? I say to them,
people watching
a
this
guy wrote to me,
sentiment,
and he said, I heard you say a few years ago, and so I'll say it again, I believe there should be a status for Gentiles who want to move to Israel. There is no status right now for Gentiles who want to move to Israel, unless you get a work visa or that kind of, or a student visa. I say, or a tourist visa. I say, come to Israel and live here as a resident. You won't get the voting rights, but you will get other rights to be part of this country. And give them that life.
But let me just say something real fast. Personally, I wouldn't compare 2 million Arab Israelis to the Christians that live behind us. Those Arab Israelis, I believe, are on a different plane, being the Muslims that they are, following a different path than the majority of Christians, at least from that I've met and have personal relationships with. I can't imagine that I would put them in the same boat as the Israeli Arabs who would gladly march over Tel Aviv and slit our throats at the earliest convenience. Just based on what I've seen, you may have seen something different.
I promise we're going to have another program where we're going to talk about the different peace plans and all the different idiosyncrasies we have to put on the table, all right? All the different right-wing peace plans, all right? You guys have to forgive me. I have to pick up my son, so we got to wrap up. I want to end up on one point.
We want to thank you, Avi.
On one point.
Avi, thank you.
I want to wrap up on one point, which I think everyone will agree with me. I'm almost positive everyone will agree with me, right? Because you spoke about the issue of sovereignty. And that today, Jews as being the sovereign, there's a disconnect with Jews outside of Israel. They don't understand the ramifications of that, and they're fearful of it. The point I make is we're going to have peace here. Forget about the non-Israeli Jews. We're only going to have peace here when the Israeli Jews internalize but we are missing the fact that the sovereign government of Israel does not act like a sovereign with our Muslim citizens in the Galil or in the Negev. And we can't expect peace to happen with a population that wants to destroy us, that we have citizens within us, even in our own parliament, who talk openly about destroying the state of Israel. And because Israel is such a liberal democracy, we let them stay there. We're not going to have peace in this region until we are acting as a true sovereign in the countries where we have full control over. And we have to help our fellow Israelis internalize that that's going to be the day that life is going to be better, not just for the Jews, but for the Christians and the Muslims and everyone who truly wants to live in free and enjoy the freedoms that Israel gives them that no other country in the Middle East gives them. But until we hit that day, we're going to continue to have our problems because Muslims who cause trouble in the Galil and the Negev and in Jaffa, etc.
So when are elections?
All right, we gotta go. Yeah,
April
9th. April 9th.
It was going to be April Fool's.
That's an opportunity to create change. This is a democracy. We got to vote the right way. We got to vote for the candidates.
I wish we'd have
further
the
that
already changed in the
agenda.
next election. I think we
Okay.
still do a couple more Judean
We have-
roundtables
right.
before we're going to get the
We'll
right
get there,
Israeli
folks.
leadership.
Israeli elections
but we're
coming
getting
up.
there.
Yeah.
But the bottom
April
line
9th.
is we are all collectively working in each in our own ways to bring about the awareness so that we can have the leaders necessary to do the right things. I wish I could say we're there now with this next election. I don't think so. But that's why we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue doing our thing to make this happen. Thank you so much,
Have a good
everyone.
week.
Happy Abelos.
Happy
Thank you,
holidays.
everybody.
Shalom. Thank you,
Thank you,
Gedalia.
Ben.
All
Thank
the
you, Josh.
best.
Thank
Good
you,
job,
Shine.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Guys, check
Shalom,
out the
shalom.
view.
Judean Roundtable in the Judean Hills. Take care, everyone.
Right across
All right,
from
guys.
us here.